In 1962, a group of men from Ford Motor Company flew out to Modena, Italy, to discuss a merger with a certain Italian automaker. After spending the entire day discussing the contract and the legal stuff, this automaker asked the group from Dearborn, Michigan, what would become a critical question. If I wanted to race at a racetrack and Henry Ford II says no, do I go? The Dearborn men said no, you don't go. Funnily enough, that was the wrong answer. The Italian man grabbed his things, took his lawyers, and left the room. An entire day of waiting to get the cold shoulder. That Italian automaker was Enzo Ferrari. And we all know what that last name means. A mountain of wins, including 9 overall wins at the prestigious 24 Hours of Le Mans. That winning energy to be channeled into the Ford Motor Company and a new line of sports cars. That was the idea for the Dearborn man who spearheaded this trip, Lee Iacocca. Iacocca flew his men back to Dearborn with their tails between their legs. After all, Ford Motor Company ended up spending millions of dollars beforehand on the auditing of Ferrari's equipment and legal negotiations. How would Henry Ford II, let alone the Ford Motor Company, respond to losing tens of millions of dollars to Enzo Ferrari? Well, you assemble the automotive equivalent of the Avengers, walk onto Ferrari's home turf of Le Mans, you bury them 6 feet under the finish line, and build an automotive landmark right on top of it. This is the story of the Ford GT40. Fast forward a couple of years to 1966, and Henry Ford II's automotive armada arrived at the finish line at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in a 1-2-3 finish. The world is stunned. An automotive company known for making boring family sedans were sitting on the same podium Ferrari sat at for the past 6 years in a row. How did they do it? I'll show you. The 1966 Ford GT40 Mark II had a 7-liter V8, ripped from the Ford Galaxies that were running in NASCAR. The Mark II was just a Mark I, but modified only to fit this monster of an engine, made it to a 4-speed manual transmission made by CarCraft in Wixom, Michigan. It rocketed this car to a top speed of 219 miles per hour on the infamous Mulsanne Straight. These cars dominated Le Mans and continued to until 1969. And then, nothing. Not a single darn thing for nearly 40 years. We did get prototypes. However, none of these cars ever made it that far. They all just fell through. But eventually, in 2004, the king returned.
In what gear do you realize that a car is everything it's supposed to be? In what gear do you know nothing can catch you? In what gear do you know it's the one? Introducing the Ford GT. This is the one. The pace car for an entire company.
My name is Tyler Wolf. I am Roush's corporate archivist slash curatorial associate here at our private museum, the Roush Automotive Collection. Officially, my job title involves archiving and managing the private vehicle collection, coordinating loans and special exhibits, all that sorts of stuff. So the two GTs behind me, the darker blue one is a production model of the 2005 GT. It's one of Jack Roush's personal cars that he bought from a dealer. The one in the Gulf livery behind me is what Ford internally refers to as a workhorse mule. It's a development mule. It was probably among the first 10 or so chassis that are built that are used for things like rut fitment of body panels, engine and exhaust tuning. The car behind us in particular was, to my knowledge, used primarily as an engine and exhaust tuning test bed, basically.
The new Ford GT was a beautiful tribute to the original Le Mans winning classic. Aluminum frame, a friction stir welded center tunnel with a magnesium center console, 4 piston aluminum Brembo brakes, and above all else, you've got one hell of an engine. A 5.4 liter modular V8 in a dual overhead cam with 4 valves per cylinder. For those that don't know cars, that was very fast for the time. Sales would eventually slow going into 2007, but the prices of mint condition GTs began to skyrocket. So Ford knew we needed a sequel. But how do you one-up the original? Well, in 2015, nearly a decade after the car's previous launch, Ford had an answer. This is the new Ford GT.
Ford GT behind me is actually Jack's personal example of the car. It's serial number 15 for model year 2017, so very, very low in the delivery order, probably among the first 20 or so cars that were delivered to customers. Jack's had it here at the museum ever since it was delivered in June of that year.
Carbon fiber monocoque, push rod suspension, carbon fiber wheels, flying buttresses integrated into the design, and a 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds, and a top speed of 219 miles per hour, just like the Ford GT40 race car from 50 years ago. Speaking of performance, the engine. It's not a V8, but an EcoBoost V6 with 670 horsepower as of the recent 2020 model year. All of this mated to a Getrag 7-speed automatic transmission, which is the same manufacturer of Mercedes-AMG and Ferrari's transmissions. All of this to tribute the 50th anniversary of Ford's dominance at Le Mans back in 1966. But it's one thing to name off stats and pretend it's quick. But it's another thing to put it up against the best the world has to offer on the same stage 50 years later. Ford did, and guess what? They won again. I think it's safe to say that victory is just in the GT's blood.
The thing about the one behind me is it's infinitely more drivable, in my opinion, and it's comfortable, and I don't know. The blue one gives me, like, you remember in the early 2000s when like retro was like everything, PT Cruisers and HHRs, and it's got that vibe, but it feels like an early 2000s car, so it's got a lot of plasticky. This feels space age, like there's carbon fiber, Alcantara, like everywhere. Also, it's got a really goofy door on it. If you ever like the roof is built into the door, so when you shut it, it like goes over about an inch over your head as you're closing it like that, and that's disconcerting. But